It's actually an exciting week for us. I guess another exciting week. Last week we had our potluck and our singing, and that was exciting to be fellowship and loving on one another and learning new songs. Today is exciting for a different reason. Today is the first of two of our Canyon Church checkups, our elders meetings, and that's this time of the year where after service today you can go and you can get your lunch and then come back around 1 o'clock, and the elders will be here afternoon to talk to our church family. And they'll present us the finances, and those are important, but they'll also share what we're doing next year, why we were doing what we did this year. They're going to answer your questions. They're going to listen. And I just got to say, how cool is that? How cool is that we have elders who are willing to do that, who are willing to come together, spend time being transparent, being open, being honest, being just real and visible. And I can tell you guys, for me, honestly, personally, that makes me just so honored to be a part of this church. And we're so richly blessed that Mark and Dan and Tommy, our elders, actually lead from the front, setting an example for us where we can actually see them. And so today what I want to do to start, I kind of want to go over a little bit of what we did last year. And by doing that is I got this opportunity last year to share the vision statement that Canyon has now come up with to kind of describe what we're all about. And the vision statement goes like this. Canyon Church's vision is to be a part of a great spiritual awakening, giving everyone the opportunity to hear the good news that King Jesus is alive and redeeming people to God today. We take Jesus' final command to go and make disciples seriously, considering those final words to be our first priority. That's our vision statement. That's what this church is all about, making disciples. We are disciples who make disciples. And before we get into the lesson, I want to kind of share with you guys some of the results from our anonymous survey that we took. Don't worry, none of your comments will be up there. And what I'm going to do, we're going to do a side-by-side from last year to this year. So here we are, and orange is last year. And this first question that we asked, I know it's a little tiny up there, but it says, my prayer life has 1, never been worse, 10, never been better. Last year we scored a 6.8. A lot of 5s, a lot of right in the middle. Check this out. A marked improvement. In fact, even our person who's a 1 maybe is 100% improvement from before to a 2 now. But we're moving across the board. Check this out. How often are you reading your Bible? 1, never. 10, every day. We had some lower numbers here. 6.6 average. Check this out. There's not a single person anymore who says, I'm never reading my Bible. Not a single person. And by the way, we have more responses from our survey this year than we did last year, which means there's more opportunities to bring that score down, or in this case, as we're going to see, bring it up too. The next question was, Canyon Church is meeting my needs spiritually. 7.6 is a good number. I would imagine a lot of churches would probably be okay with that. Maybe even happy about that. But not this church. Look at that. Look at that. And I'm going to tell you this right now. The only way that this happens is by buying in the vision. That's the only way that this type of jump happens. There's not even a 1, 2, or 3 anymore. In fact, there's only 1, 5, and below. Everything else is just through the roof. Through the roof. This is really encouraging for me, and I know it's very encouraging for our elders too to see these numbers. 2023, how do you feel about the direction of Canyon Church? Again, 7.6. I imagine a lot of churches would be like, yes, look at this. Not us, not this year. Look at that. 8.6 are bought into the direction. And again, you might say, well, how do you know it's about the vision, that's what's really driving some of this stuff? Last year, I understand Canyon Church's vision for discipling. 1 meant I didn't understand it at all. It's all the way to 10. Again, 7.2. Some people would be okay with that. Through the roof improvement. And again, these are your answers. This is not just us guessing. This is what you have said about your church, about your personal walk with God. And that's incredible. That we understand that we are here to make disciples while we ourselves are being disciples. We are constantly learning, constantly being perfected and refined and renewed to God, imitating the life of Jesus, being filled to the power of capital S Spirit. I love that. And I'll tell you what, we started last year by talking about vision. And I kind of talked about what the importance of a vision was. And I gave this verse, Proverbs 29:18, that says, when people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild. But whoever obeys the law is joyful. Some of the translations say, those who have no vision will perish. That's heavy. That's kind of the biblical basis for casting this vision that we talked about. And I'll tell you what, this has come true for us. We've seen this now. The numbers are bearing this out. We are more joyful. We are more filled with the Spirit and loving and serving and in the Word because you all are buying into the vision. So today I want to look at a little bit of a story about a man who had no vision. Literally, he had no vision. It's the story of the blind man in John 9. And you can turn there and follow along. I'm going to read some of the passages as we go through. Not all of it. I'll give more of a narration. But Jesus and his disciples, they're in Jerusalem. And they come across this man who's born blind. And for the disciples here, they're about to get an object lesson in blindness by coming across this blind man. Because right off the bat, when they see this man, they stop treating him as a person, but rather start treating him as an example or opportunity to fine-tune their theology. Rabbi, they said, who sinned? This man or his parents? Again, notice how quickly they've moved, or maybe immediately moved from this man's actual needs as a beggar, as a poor man, as a hungry man who is blind to, well, why do you think this is happening? Why is he in this situation? It's kind of unhelpful to get theological and philosophical for a man who's in that situation. And I feel like we can do that sometimes in our day too, where we can come across people who have these needs, but then we start to justify, well, why they are in their need. Maybe as a way to even shore up our own belief system. And maybe that's just me, but I feel like sometimes when we see a person in need, we kind of usually speculate, well, how did they get in that position? And then we stop seeing the person as a person, but rather a situation. And how often does that lead us to being the example Jesus modeled? Or does it often get in the way of us being like Jesus? Even the more innocent questions about, like, how can my belief system, or I guess your morality system, account for this situation? Why does God allow that to happen or allow this to happen? And we all have our belief systems and our values, and for good reasons, but if we can't actually see the person in front of us, well, then those belief systems, those values, those morals, they're pretty useless, no matter what our persuasion is. And so back to the story of the disciples, they ask, who caused this to happen? This man or his parents? It's kind of like, who's to blame? Who's to blame for blindness in the world? Or is this nature or nurture, this man or his parents? And Jesus, as he often does not choose from the two options available here. He picks his own. He picks God's option, right? One that the questioners could not even think of. Because Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. For Jesus, he's not playing the blame game. He's not about that nonsense. When Jesus sees someone in need, he does not use that person's plight to develop a self-righteous moral agenda. Jesus sees an opportunity, a chance to recognize and do God's will. And God's will is revealed not in blaming, not in right or wrong. It's not in questioning their life's choices. We don't see Jesus doing that with people who is brought to him in actual sin, let alone a man who's just born blind. Jesus sees an opportunity to show mercy, to work God's glory and perform an act which pays close attention to this man's needs, his actual needs, not just his poorness, not just his hunger. Jesus is going to perform a miracle here. And he kind of does it in the most ironic way you could think about. And it's definitely not a procedure that we would consider today for healing anything, let alone blindness. Because what Jesus does is he spits in the dirt. And he takes this mud that he makes with his spit and rubs it in the guy's eyes. I mean, just imagine being a disciple, and you're thinking you're getting all philosophical and smart. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents? And Jesus goes, neither. Watch this. Takes some mud, rubs it on his head. I mean, you're an apostle there, and you're probably like, whoa, 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 I was just asking a question. What are you doing? What is going on here? Jesus, this man is already blind, and if he wasn't, he's going to be now. But in short, Jesus makes this mud, and he rubs it directly into the affected areas of this man's need, his actual need, his blindness he longs to see. And Jesus shows here that it can only be God who clears sight for the blind. In fact, Jesus' way of healing this man's blindness becomes a metaphor for the entire miracle. Jesus heals by getting in there, into the affected areas first, and when things are muddiest, when things are their hardest to see, Jesus began healing by allowing this man to trust and obey. Perfect, Will. To trust and obey him. He gave him instructions. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. The deed is done. The miraculous miracle has happened, but the story's not over yet. It turns into a comedy of shallow human comprehension. In fact, it's a sad comedy of people more blind than the actual blind man. Because as soon as he gets back, all of these people start asking all the wrong questions, get into all the wrong details. First, it starts with his neighbors. The neighbors ask themselves, hey, isn't this the man who sat and begged us? How did they not know? Because they have no vision. They're blind. They're not seeing a man and his needs. They're completely blind to that. So they're trying to argue with themselves. Some say, yeah, he is. And the other are like, no, he just looks like him. Kind of maybe. And the guy seems like he finally's had enough, and he goes, you know what? I am the man. I'm he. And notice the neighbors ask themselves. They're just talking amongst themselves. They're not actually going and talking with the person. How hard is that, right? Like, how hard is it to just ask? And we laugh and we chuckle, but how often do we stop and ask the right questions of the people who are right in front of us? See how the neighbors at first prefer to do what? Just talk. Not even about his needs anymore, any of that. They're just debating whether or not this is the man. Not paying attention. And I love this, that this formerly blind man is just so direct. There is no fluff about this guy. He is just blunt and straightforward. The neighbors finally do ask a good question. How then were your eyes open, they asked. And he just gives them the details. He's just like, well, hey, listen, the man they called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash, so I went and washed, and now I can see. The story. It's kind of how I tell Tamara stories when she asks me questions about, oh, your sister got a new job? Yeah, she got a new job. Yep. What's it about? What's she doing? I don't know. I didn't ask that. I don't know. I just hear the details. She has a new job. She's happy with it. The family's happy. That's it. That's what this man's like. He's just giving them, here are the details. Bada bing, bada boom. This is what Jesus did. And the neighbors go back to dumb questions pretty quick. And this might be one of the dumbest questions in all of the Bible. Where is this man? They asked him. Now you might be saying, well, why is that dumb? This guy was blind. You ever ask a blind person for directions? Or like, hey, did you see that? No. I don't know, he said. I don't know. Of course not. It's hilarious. What kind of question is that? Kind of reminds me of how I started asking better questions of my kids. One day, Noah's in the car, and we're going home from school, and I go, how was your day? Good. And then about an hour later, I get a a message from a teacher, an update on one of the apps, and it's a bunch of pictures of this assembly. And there's a picture of Noah with a falcon on his arm petting it. Why didn't you tell me about that? You didn't ask. Fair, I didn't. I asked how it was. Your day was good. You had a good day because you got to pet a falcon. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I get that. That's my fault. But the story actually gets more ridiculous, believe it or not. And again, I love this man and the simplicity he represents, the elegant truth of people who have needs and then have those needs fulfilled by being faithful and obedient. This is pretty straightforward for this guy. He refused to speculate on theories or political agendas. He knows only what Jesus asked him to do. So I'll pause here for a second. What is Jesus asking us to do? What's he asking us to do? And I'll give you hints. It's in the Canyon Church's vision. We use a phrase that we consider Jesus' final command to be our first priority. His final command, the Great Commission. He asked us all to do this, to go out into all the nations, making disciples of all men, teaching them to obey that which I have commanded you. That's what he told us to do. This guy's telling him, hey, I'm healed. I can see because I listened to Jesus. I obeyed his commands. And so what do these people do? Well, they take him to see the real fun people of the time, the Pharisees. Just a real good time for him. And I just got to imagine, he could finally see. He's got to be so excited about this. I'm pretty sure, and I'm speculating here, he does not want to go see the Pharisees as one of the first things he can see. He's not going to probably want to do that. I imagine he wants to go see the rolling hills and the grass and the trees and the birds and the sky. And if it's nighttime, maybe the stars and the moon and all this stuff. And maybe the people that he's loved, the people that he's known as family. So this man comes before the Pharisees and he repeats a very simple story of what Jesus did. Now, what do the Pharisees do? Boy, not only do they ask the wrong question, they get hung up on something real silly. They're not like, wow, there's a guy healing blind people? They go, no, wow, there's a guy healing blind people on the Sabbath? How dare he? How dare he? This man can't be from God, for he doesn't keep the passage. He doesn't keep the Sabbath. And I love that someone in the room, maybe a couple, sounds like a couple, well, how can a sinner perform such signs? Yeah, that's the right question again. There you go. There's the right question. But it divided them. And eventually they turn to the blind man who, again, I just picture this guy. You can finally see he's probably like, whoa, look at this. This building's really tall. These things go way up there. I didn't realize that. He can see for the first time. I doubt he's all that concerned about their conversation, especially when their conversation is not about the fact that he was healed, but about which day he was healed on. You think he cares what day it was? Of course not. And so they ask him, hey, you had your eyes opened. What do you have to say about him? Again, straightforward. Well, obviously this guy's a prophet. He's a prophet. He's got to be. So what do you think the Pharisees do? Well, they don't like this. So they go full-blown crazy here. They go, maybe he wasn't really blind. He's just pretending to be poor and blind? That's where we're going to go. Okay, we're going to go with that. So how do they try to figure out if this is the truth? They go get his parents. First off, if Sawyer was an adult still dealing with his issues, and someone calls me up and goes, hey, David, you and Tamara need to get down here to the religious leaders of the day. We need to talk to you about Sawyer. First of all, my thought would be like, great, what has he done now? But then if they went, he's healed, he's better, I'd be a puddle. I'd be so floored. But let me tell you this, if someone then did not believe me about all the stuff we've gone through, let me tell you, the Holy Spirit would have to bear so much fruit of the Spirit in me for me to not strangle those people. Someone was like, well, did you really have all these surgeries and go through all this pain and heartache at Chalk with Sawyer? Or were you just pretending and having fun? The audacity. Hey, is this your son, the blind one? How is it that they can see? Do you think they want to be there right then talking to these fools? Their son has just been healed. He might be seeing them for the first time in his life, his parents. And they're realizing that too. And they say, our son, yeah, he is our son. And we know that he was born blind, but how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. Because they were afraid of these Jewish leaders who had decided that anyone who acknowledged Jesus was Messiah or that he was performing these miracles would be put out of the synagogue. So can I just say again how great it is that we have leaders that allow us to ask questions? That they are willing to put out an anonymous survey so people can write and say whatever they want without any fear of what will come back on them. They're willing to hear what we're struggling with, listen to our thoughts, our criticisms of them, of whatever it is, with absolutely no fear of reprisal. What a blessing. Because not everyone has that. And back to this story, they bring out the healed blind man back a second time and say, okay, tell us the truth. We know this guy's a sinner. We know. And he says, listen, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. I know one thing. I was blind, but now I see. And so again, they start asking, well, how did he do it? Tell us how he does it. And this is spent. There's not a lot of sarcastic statements in the Bible, but this one's one of my favorites. He goes, I've already told you and you don't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Hey, do you want to become his disciples too? Is that what this is about? You guys are secretly Jesus fans, right? They didn't like that. They get mad at him because they're immature on top of being dense and blind. They go, how dare you? You are this fellow's disciple. We're disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. And he goes, really? Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes? We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening of the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not do a thing. How about that for a bold statement? He's not worried about getting thrown out of the synagogue. He could care less. You know what they do? They just go, you know what? You were steeped in sin at birth. You couldn't possibly be healed. You couldn't possibly have vision. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? Or they're maybe arguing this couldn't possibly be from God. What, were there other people, like a follower of Zeus, going around healing blind people? And they were like, well, you're healed, but we don't like that because it's not from God, because it was a sinner. What are we talking about here? So they throw him out. They're not having it. They just throw him out. And I love this next part. Jesus hears that he got thrown out. And he goes and he finds this formerly blind man. And he comes up to him and he says, hey, do you believe in the Son of Man? And remember, this formerly blind man hasn't actually seen Jesus yet. And he goes, well, sir, who is he? Tell me so that I may believe in him. And this just had to be earth-shattering. You've now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. And the only appropriate response to that is this. Lord, I believe. And he fell down and worshiped him. That's when the vision of Jesus comes in focus for this man. With this guy's proclamation, Lord, I believe, that's when the healing was complete. Because now the man doesn't just see the world around him, but he sees the reason for why he can see. He sees the reason for why he's in this world and the reason why God does what he does and the reason for why he loves him so. We here at Canyon Church, we have a vision, and that vision was given to us by Jesus. Our eyes have been muddied where we could not see. We were blinded, but Jesus healed us. And now we can proclaim, yes, I believe Jesus is the Lord. I believe he is him. And that's when we really can get to work. That's when we can see the vision. Canyon Church's vision is about loving God and loving people. That's what it truly is all about. If you truly love God, you will go and make disciples. If you truly love people, you will tell them about seeing him. That's why for this past year, we've been sharing what we're praising God for. So we ourselves could be encouraged, absolutely. But so that we can be emboldened to go tell others we were blind, but now we see Jesus healed us. And one of the greatest gifts that we get by making that proclamation is the gift of the Holy Spirit, who gives us the vision, that leads us on our path on how to live the life Jesus modeled for us. That's the basic whole point of the Fruit of the Spirit series. How are we led by the Spirit? How are we modeling Jesus Christ, living the life God has planned for us to live? Things will look different as we do that. Things will change. And I mentioned that a year ago, that this church will not look the same a year from now. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Because when you follow a vision, God's going to lead us all sorts of places. Quite often places that you have no idea he's leading you to. If you had told me 4 years ago, 2 years ago, David, you're going to be a preacher, I would have been like, you, sir, are blind. God's going to lead people to us. He's going to bring them into our lives, and we're going to then have an opportunity to love them and disciple them so they can be healed through the power of the Holy Spirit, through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and by the grace of God. And that they themselves will then start going and making disciples, because if that's not what we're doing, then what are we doing? I love Jeremiah 29:10. I know it's a very, very popular verse, but I just love it because if you're bought into the vision, this will give you such encouragement. Jeremiah 29:10 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." So what's it going to be, Canyon Church? Are we going to stay on this path? Are we going to continue to improve those numbers that we saw? Are we going to start reading our Bibles more? Are we going to start praying more? Are we going to start fellowshipping more? Are we going to start sharing the Word of God more? Are we going to start praising Him more? Are we going to start loving God more so we can start loving people even better? Are we going to be Spirit-led or not? Those are really our only two options there. We can do that or we can not. And I would say this, that so far it seems to me that that is exactly what you all want to do. Those numbers bear that out. So I would say if you're sitting in this audience right now and you haven't made the decision yet to follow Jesus Christ, to say, Lord, I believe, there's no better day than today. Or maybe you haven't even had the chance yet or made the decision to join this church officially. Talk to these elders who are willing to listen to you, and I'll tell you why. So you can become a member of this family and get plugged into the vision of being disciples who make disciples. Come along for this plan, for a hope and a future that God has for us as we fulfill the vision. If anyone has any needs, please let it be known. Come as we stand and sing.